Just when you thought you'd heard enough insanity from the disgraced former president, Donald Trump calls a press conference.
I think that our country is right now in the most dangerous position it's ever been in from an economic standpoint, from a safety standpoint. Both gangs on the street and, frankly, gangs outside of our country in the form of other countries that are, frankly, very powerful. They're very powerful countries, and we don't know what we're doing. We have leadership that has no clue how to handle them or how to handle any other situation.
I spent the last day or so trying to analyze this press conference, getting my head around why he called it, what the purpose was, why he said what he said, and I've kind of given up. It's not worth my time or yours. But there is a takeaway, a general takeaway from this press conference that he called at Mar-a-Lago with a select members of the press, pretty much, the right-wing media and maybe Maggie Haberman, and that was about it. And that is that Donald Trump is scared. He is scared. He is worried. He wasn't expecting Kamala Harris to be his opponent. He was all prepared for Joe Biden to be too old and therefore he was able to kind of have one up on him, and now that has been taken away from him. And so he's been unseated. He is confused.
But we were given Joe Biden, and now we're given somebody else. And I think, frankly, I'd rather be running against somebody else.
He is concerned, and the way he kind of processes that is by doubling down on his racism, his abuse, his hatred, and his negativity. And we saw this at the start of the conference. He didn't really know what to say. He hadn't really prepared anything, clearly, didn't have a list of talking points, didn't take advantage of this moment. Instead, he relied on his old tropes from his rallies and relied on his instinct, which, as we know, has no value. So the first thing he did was take the biggest events in history and claim that they will happen again if he is not elected president. So he referred to the economy and said that you'll see a Great Depression like in 1929.
We have a lot of bad things coming up. You could end up in a depression of the 1929 variety, and you have people dying financially because they can't buy bacon.
It's so weird because there is absolutely nothing to suggest, with the current economy as it stands, with the graph looking good, that a Great Depression is even on the horizon. And yet Donald Trump is so convinced that whatever he says will be taken as gospel. No thought for the fact that there are people much smarter than him, which is basically everybody, who can look at the facts and be like, no, that's not going to happen. There is nothing to suggest that there is a depression on the horizon. And then, of course, he talks about, international relations and war, and refers to Ukraine and Russia and how it would never have happened if he was president, and says that it is likely that there will be World War III if he is not elected president. So here we have two kind of seismic events, a world war and a Great Depression, and Donald Trump using them as political collateral, claiming that if he's not elected, these things will happen.
We are in great danger. We're in great danger of being in World War III. That could happen.
He hopes these things will happen. He has been praying for a recession. He's been praying for some kind of economic crash under Joe Biden's premiership to make him look good. He refused to sign off on the immigration bill to make Joe Biden look bad. He didn't want to make him look good. And it's the same when it comes to war, to the conflict in the Middle East, in Gaza. That issue is one that Donald Trump says that he can solve. If you elect him, then, all of that will end. None of this is true. Donald Trump does not have any of the power that he claims. He is just used. He's used by Netanyahu. He's used by Vladimir Putin as an easy mark. Donald Trump thinks that by befriending these dictators, the likes of Kim Jong-un, he thinks that giving him an Elton John CD is his version of international diplomacy. That's how he's able to prevent any kind of conflict, by giving Little Rocket Man the Rocket Man album. I mean, that is the extent of his intellect, and it is insulting to all of us, to everybody else, to think that he has any ability in these departments. So fear-mongering is his go-to now. He has nowhere else to go. He tried birtherism again with Kamala Harris after doing it on Obama, now claiming is she black or is she Asian, and she needs to make up her mind, and claiming that she is the one who is insulting people. It is insane. It is deranged, spreading hate, spreading propaganda, spreading falsehoods, and spreading lies. He has no policy options left. He basically reversed Roe versus Wade, banned abortion on a national level, claimed that people wanted it back in the States, which of course nobody did, apart from the Heritage Foundation and these far-right Christian nationalists, but nobody was calling for that. Nobody wants a national abortion ban, and yet that is what Donald Trump represents and stands for. He owns it.
So I think the abortion issue has been very much tempered down, and I've answered, I think, very well in the debate, and it seems to be much less of an issue, especially for those where they have the exceptions.
In contrast, you have Kamala Harris spreading the joy with Tim Walz, talking about getting people their rights back.
I think that abortion has become much less of an issue. It's a very small, I think it's actually going to be a very small issue.
Reproductive rights, civil rights, your rights to be heard. And that is what Kamala Harris represents as a president potentially for all Americans. Donald Trump increasingly represents this tiny, tiny minority. These racist, white Christian nationalists who care only for the great replacement theory. And they think that Donald Trump saving America is stopping America from its natural trajectory of a changing demographic, as in the rest of the world. And that he wants to make America white again. Then he starts talking about Tim Walz and how he is radical. And radical? The guy's a former military man who's been a school teacher.
She picked a radical left man that is, he's got things done that he has positions that are just not, it's not even possible to believe that they exist.
This guy isn't radical, he's just normal. He represents positivity, he represents inclusivity. And he's talking about the fact that he's in with transgender people, and Donald Trump has lost the ability to speak, lost the ability to make sense, and lost the ability to electioneer. It's now just a collection of thoughts that he's been saying at rallies over and over, and now he just doesn't even bother to put these words into any kind of assembled order. It is down to his people to translate what it is that he's saying. And of course, the assembled press did a terrible job at holding him to account or pushing back on his lies. They just allowed him to talk utter garbage for an hour, and him then take select questions and complain about the questions as well.
Oh, give me a break. Listen, I had 107,000 people in New Jersey. You didn't report it. I'm so glad you asked. What did she have yesterday? 2,000 people? If I ever had 2,000 people, you'd say my campaign is finished. It's so dishonest, the press. And here's a great example. The biggest crowd I've ever spoken, I've spoken to the biggest crowds. Nobody's spoken to crowds bigger than me. If you look at Martin Luther King, when he did his speech, his great speech, and you look at ours, same real estate, same everything, same number of people, if not, we had more. And they said he had 1 million people, but I had 25,000 people. But when you look at the exact same picture, and everything's the same because it was the fountains, the whole thing, all the way back to from Lincoln to Washington, and you look at it, and you look at the picture of his crowd, my crowd, we actually had more people. They said I had 25,000 and he had 1 million people. And I'm okay with it because I liked Dr. Martin Luther King.
Donald Trump is finished. His campaign is finished. His vice presidential pick is a disaster. And a lot can happen between now and November, including Donald Trump finding every reason not to be the Republican candidate. Who only knows what will happen between now and Election Day? We will do our best to continue the analysis and bring the joy. I'm Anthony Davis. You can catch me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at meidastouch.com/newsletter.